these devices on me now. Okay, so I'm going to pull an Adinkra symbol, and you're going to do the same thing. It's an African Adinkra symbols are a very important part of, especially West African culture, but I think Africa in general. And the card I picked was called Mutuality and Harmony. Asram ne Ninsorama is what it is. It says the moon and the star, harmony exists between elements in the sky, such as the stars and the moon. How does harmony and mutuality speak to you today? And how does mutuality and harmony speak to you? Can you hear me? Okay. How does that particular Adinkra symbol, harmony and mutuality, how does it speak to you today? No, no, not you. I'm trying to talk to the people in the room. The, because this mic is for you all, right, that are not in the room. Got you. Okay. I don't know. Okay. DeGruy. No problem.
Is she done with that one? I can swap them out.
I think someone's bringing me a mic for the room now. So I guess you'll both hear me.
Do you need that mic anymore?
This one. I just need the one that everyone can hear.
Are you good on this one? I can just replace it.
If it's the one that every,
This is the one that goes to the room,
okay, and that's the room that goes to the other people.
just virtual.
So how are they
This
going
goes
to
to
hear?
both. This goes to both virtual.
This goes to both. Excellent.
Yes, yes.
Okay, are we close to wrapping up? Not close to wrapping up. Okay, all right. Okay, if everyone can keep it down because there are two groups left that I don't think are finished. So, yeah, so let's just make certain that everybody gets a chance. And there are people online that are, so we want to. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, and the session kind of closes. That's just what I've been told. No, I wanted to speak to everyone. I wanted to get a chance to speak to everyone. So, um, okay, so here's the thing. If everybody can kind of turn out, I think the work that we do is extremely important work, but it is also taxing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically on us. In order for us to be prepared to be able to work in these environments, to work with these systems that we know are toxic, we have to center ourselves. And for me, I think it's also important to be in community, to be in group, to be in circle, and to bring yourself back to these kinds of things. How many people in the room consider themselves to be extroverted? Raise your hand if you're an extrovert. I want you to look at that. Now, the rest of the folks are not. Are you following me? Now, again, what we have to appreciate, I'm an extrovert, so it's easier for an extrovert to basically dial it down and to be more introverted, but it is far more difficult for someone who is more introverted to be extroverted. Does that make sense? So we don't hear their voices. They're just as passionate, just as committed, but maybe it doesn't show up in the same way that more extroverted voices kind of happen. That's the other reason to do circle, is because it gives people a chance to use their own voice however it feels comfortable for them. And it also helps you learn something a little bit more intimate about a person. In the session before, we talk about empathy interviews as opposed to a scale from 1 to 10 and everybody picks 5, and it's meaningless. It's about really hearing people, and I'm one of those people. When I taught at the university, 25 years I taught graduates, MSW students. And one of the things that I would do is when we would get, we were talking about people with persistent mental illness, say people who have schizophrenia, right? Not that are schizophrenics. So people who have schizophrenia, I would bring folks in and bring them to the class. Let's have that conversation because it gets very cerebral when the person's not in the room. It gets very intellectual, and we forget our humanity. We forget the virtue. And when we were talking about, people were talking about gangs. Well, I work in the community. I had them seated in between each one of my students. I said, now ask them the questions you asked me last week. Well, I can sit somewhere else. I don't want you to sit somewhere else, right? Because we tend to objectify people, other them. And when they're in the room, when we're all in the room together, then we recognize our full humanity. And if we don't practice that, we become one of those. Well, for example, I've written an evidence-based model that my daughter uses at her organization. It's been used around the country. It's effective and it works. But what people will say to me is, well, Dr. Joy, can you give me your model? I said, no, I'm not going to give you my model. I have a 10-week graduate level course, and at the end of that 10 weeks, you learn my model, because this is heart work. I don't care how many letters you have behind your name. Some people should not be in a room with a warm body. Should not. And they graduated with the little cords, everything. But they shouldn't be in a room with a warm body, because our metric for measuring competence is not correct. It's a standard measurement. And so what happens, you cross the T's, you dot the I's, but if you're dealing with people who have been put upon, that have been downtrodden, that have been beaten down, that have all of those things, what I don't want you to do is re-injure them. And sometimes that's what happens with the most well-meaning person. So this work is about really understanding that it is hard work. And if it's not that for you, then maybe you should be in a room with no windows, and deal with things. But if we're dealing with people, we need to show up. And that means we get to be who we are. Be who you are. Stay in your lane. Nobody has to be Dr. Joy but Dr. Joy. This is how I do it, right? But we need every single one of you to be in your lane. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I want to talk about this about allyship, and I do it often, because there are a lot of people, and the other thing is we invent words to try to find. I don't think we needed another word, because to be an ally is to be a friend, right? I need you to befriend me. I need you to embrace me. You don't need another title to do what's right. But there was a situation that you all know about. You remember the woman that she made herself up that pole and took down that Confederate flag. Remember that? Well, when people started talking to me about, because people want to know how to help. I have a video, 35 million people saw it. It's called Trip to the Grocery Store, talking about me and my half black and half white sister-in-law. When my daughter that's here was about 10 years old, I tell that story, it went viral. And what we learned about it, Kathleen and Bahia and I talked, is that people want to know, what can I do? I'm not black, what can I do? And that story of that woman that went up that, first of all, let me just say, shimmying yourself up a pole is not an easy thing to do. So she had to practice doing that a long time before she could get up the pole. So there was a group of people who had strategized this whole thing. So the couple of things, they had an attorney present that was at the bottom of the pole, because they knew when she came down they were going to arrest her. So they had everything worked out. Went off perfectly except one thing. No one had anticipated what the police were going to do to get her off the pole. And they were going to tase it. And now the attorney, white male attorney, is sit there because he's already, but he's the only one that can hear that that's their plan, is to tase the pole. That's how they were going to get her down. And he didn't have time to discuss it. He hugged the pole. He hugged that pole. He said, if you're going to tase her, you're going to tase me. Unwilling to tase a white male attorney, they waited for her to come down. So when people ask me, what can you do? I say, hug the pole. Hug the pole. Because that's what this work is about. Thank you so much. Do I have all the cards? If all the cards aren't back, because I tell people every session something disappears, because people say, Jesus wanted me to have this card. And I'm like, okay, we're going to try to get you some. Yeah, you can order them online. And they're inexpensive, and they're different kinds of cards. So you can look at them and see what works for your business or your school, and you want me to sign the book, okay? I will do that. So are there any questions about how, and again, this is just one very small part of doing Circle and being in Circle. Yes? Well, first of all, every person would have picked their own card. It would have been a blind pick for each person, and then they would introduce themselves with it. I've done this like corporate structures, suits. Right? And it is amazing what happens in the room when everyone shares their virtue. It just changes the energy in the room. And so it's about really bringing the conversation up a notch. Everyone feels a little uncomfortable. It's weird. You're with different people, and we're dealing with intense subjects. But like I said, what I try to tell people, a really good friend of mine, Billy Mayo, I don't know how many of you know Billy, but she's done a lot of work, actually all over the country. But Billy said whenever she works with people, and it's diverse groups of people, black people have been surveilled. Latinx people have been surveilled. Indigenous people have been surveilled. It's like, the Negro problem. right? There was actually, this is what it was called, the Negro problem. So everything was kind of cased in that kind of narrative. And what happens is when we do this kind of thing, and people start getting concerned when there's more than 3 black people getting together, it's a problem. Lord, they're coming together, they're grouping together, they're getting ready to do something. And what Billy Mayo taught me, she says, consider us all part of an orchestra. And in that orchestra, you have the percussion section, you got strings, you got wind instruments. And we're all part of the orchestra. But sometimes the string section has to meet alone. Not to be alone, but so that when they come back, their contribution is important to the sound that we're going to produce. And so sometimes we, as an orchestra, have to separate, but only for the purpose of coming back to make beautiful music. And so when we do this work, nobody needs to be concerned that, somebody is planning a coup, right? What we're planning is to build together, to make beautiful music together. And that requires us to sometimes meet alone. And that's what these conferences are about. They're about really giving us a shot in the arm to go back into these places where right now, and I just really have to say this, while we're here, people are trying to send us back to Jim Crow. While we're here, all of the things that were done during the 60s are being reversed on the ground. See, it's happening on state levels, repealing things. It's unbelievable. It was strategic. It's strategic. If you get people that are running the city council and the board of education in your particular area, and how you're dealing with superintendents, and all of those people but if those people are strategically picked, have you noticed that they replace themselves with the same kind of person? And we weren't looking. And there was no representation, and that's how these laws, the policies, right there, hidden in plain sight, it happens to us. We have to be able to show up in these spaces. And like I've said to people, I'm 65 years old. I'm going to do this so long as there is breath in my body. But I'm also okay with stepping aside and handing the mic to someone else. And we also have to know when to do that. Randall Robinson, who passed recently, wrote the foreword to my book. And Randall said a lot of people have come to do good, but stayed to do well. And what ends up happening is we have leadership that's basically kind of turned into, I'm going to get mine. But they didn't start that way. And so when we see those things happening, we need to know when we need to replace ourselves. I'm going to be here, but I may not have the mic. I don't need to have the mic all the time. I can be that support. I can wash the dishes or stack the chairs, but we have to know when it's time to move and to pass the baton, right? I'm not going to hit the tape, so I need to make certain I pass the baton. So these are the things that I would say that we need to take back, and to take care of yourselves, because we're on the front lines. I mean, honestly, however, how many foibles we have or problems, you all showed up because you're doing the work. And so we need everybody to be well, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so that's what Circle is about, replenishing ourselves and restoring ourselves in community with other folks. And to make certain that those folks that are not extroverts are heard and embraced and accepted. So that's it for me.
On behalf of Fresh Start Family Services, we would like to tell all you marvelous people, thank you for coming out and supporting us. Our wonderful presenters, local and national, we love you. We'll do this again in the very near future. Everybody, take some value from this and apply it to the people we work with. Let's help these black babies. Make sense? Yes. All right. On 3, everybody, we're going to say we love you. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, you don't have to go home. All right, take care, everybody.